Snow swept across the Bitterroot Mountains like a ghost's breath. Inside a half-collapsed log cabin, a man with a face carved by frost and years, Elas Boone, threw another log on the fire. Outside, 5 boys wrestled in the snow, wild as wolves, untamed as the peaks that raised them. Their laughter was harsh, their fights rough. No woman had ever lasted a single day with them. Every nanny, every helper, they all fled before nightfall. The mountain man sat in silence, wondering if he was cursed or if his sons were just born of the wild itself. Dot. By noon the wind rose, carrying snow and secrets. The oldest boy, Caleb, just 12, stormed in, slamming the cabin door. "She's gone again," Pa Elias looked up. "Who?" "The new lady. She ran down the trail soon as Jake threw a snake at her." Elas groaned, rubbing his temples. "That's the 3rd one this month." The boys laughed like little devils. "We don't need no woman here." Caleb bragged, but deep down even he knew they did. The house was cold, not just from snow, but from loneliness. That night, as the fire died low, a sound came from the forest. A faint knock, almost swallowed by the wind. Elias opened the door, lantern in hand. A little girl stood there, soaked to the bone, barefoot and trembling. "Please," she whispered. "I'm lost." Elias froze. She couldn't be more than 7. "Where's your folks?" he asked softly. "They're gone," she said, her eyes glistening. Behind him, the boys peeked through the shadows, whispering to each other like scared wolves. None of them had seen a girl that small in their lives. Elias knelt down, his massive coat falling around him like a bear's hide. "You come in before you freeze solid," he said, wrapping the girl in a wool blanket. She looked around the cabin. 5 boys staring, half curious, half hostile. "What's your name, child?" Elias asked. "Leah," she said in a whisper. Her voice shook, but there was something brave about her, something the mountain couldn't break. Elias poured her a cup of warm milk, his rough hands gentle for the first time in years. The boys gathered around, eyes wide. "Is she going to stay?" P asked the youngest Tommy. "Just for the night," Elias said. But even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't true. There was something about that little girl that felt different, like the mountain had sent her there for a reason. Leah looked at each boy, her gaze soft but strong. "You shouldn't fight so much," she said suddenly. Caleb frowned. "You don't know us." "No," she replied, "but I know lonely." The cabin fell silent. Out by morning, Leah was still there, sweeping the floor with a stick broom far too big for her hands. The boys just stared. She wasn't afraid of them, not even when Jake tried to scare her with a dead mouse. "He's not scary," she said calmly. "He's just sad." Jake froze. No one had ever said that to him. Even Elias, watching from the doorway, felt something shift like warmth seeping into stone that afternoon, when a blizzard rolled down from the ridge. The boys worked together for the first time in months, chopping wood, sealing windows, carrying buckets, not because Elas told them to, but because Leah did. She moved between them with quiet strength, her tiny voice guiding like sunlight through storm clouds. "You're doing great," she said to Tommy, and he smiled, the first real smile Elias had seen from his youngest since their mother died. Dot. As night fell, Elias sat by the fire, watching Leah read from an old Bible she found on the shelf. Her voice was soft, pure. The boys sat quietly, listening. For once, there was no shouting, no fighting, just peace. The mountain wind howled outside, but inside the cabin, something sacred stirred. Elias closed his eyes, his rough hands trembling slightly. Maybe, just maybe, God hadn't forgotten them after all. Days turned into weeks. Leah became part of their lives like she'd always been there. She mended socks, brushed the horses, sang songs while the boys worked. The neighbors in town started whispering. The Wild Boone boys had turned gentle. Some said the mountain man had found a miracle, but Elias knew miracles weren't found. They were sent. One morning a sheriff's wagon rolled up the trail. 2 men in long coats stepped down. "We're looking for a runaway orphan," one said. A girl named Ela. Elias felt his chest tighten. The boys froze. "She's not a runaway," he said quietly. "She's family." The sheriff frowned. "Sir, you can't just keep her." Caleb stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "Then you'll have to take all of us." The men looked at the boys, wild but brave, standing like wolves protecting their pack. Leah gripped Elas's hand. "I don't want to go." Elas's voice was low, steady. "You won't, sweetheart." Then he turned to the sheriff. "You tell whoever's looking for her she's home now." The men exchanged glances, saw the fire in his eyes, and backed away. The wagon rolled down the trail, snow swallowing its tracks. That night, as the blizzard roared, the family gathered by the fire again. Leah laughed as Tommy told stories about the wolves that howled outside. Elas watched them. 6 souls once broken, now bound by something stronger than blood. "Pa?" Caleb asked softly. "Yeah, son." "You think Ma sent her?" Eli smiled faintly. "No, Caleb. I think God did." Outside, the mountain glowed under a full moon. The wind had softened, and the valley slept in peace. Inside the cabin, 6 hearts beat in rhythm. No longer wild, no longer alone. For the first time in years, Elias Boone whispered a prayer. Not for strength, not for survival, but for gratitude. And as Leah drifted to sleep by the fire, her small hand resting on Elas's arm, he realized the truth. No woman had ever lasted a day with his boys because none of them were meant to. The one who could save them wasn't a woman at all. She was a child, brave enough to love where others had feared. The next morning, the mountain woke in golden silence. Sunlight spilled through the frost-covered windows, painting the cabin in warmth. Leah was already awake, her tiny hands kneading biscuit dough on the table. Elias stood in the doorway watching her hum softly, a tune so pure it made the walls feel alive again. "You're up early," he said. She smiled. "The boys are hungry." Elias chuckled. "They're always hungry." But inside he felt something new. Peace. Real peace. Dot. The boys tumbled in one by one, hair messy, cheeks red from cold. Caleb sniffed the air. "Biscuits." Leah nodded proudly. "And honey, if you behave." Jake laughed. "We never behave." But even as he teased, he pulled out chairs and helped set the table. Elas noticed. No shouting, no fighting, just laughter and warmth. For the first time in years his cabin felt like home again. After breakfast, Leah followed Elias outside to the corral. The sun was melting snow from the fence rails. "Pa," she said softly, her voice almost shy. Elas turned, surprised. "What did you call me?" She blushed. "Sorry, it just slipped." His throat tightened. He knelt down, eyes glistening. "You can call me that any time you want, sweetheart." She smiled, and that smile had broke the last bit of ice around his heart. Winter passed slowly, the storms easing as spring crept into the valley. The Boone boys changed too. Caleb started carving wooden toys instead of fighting. Jake began helping Alias fix the roof. Tommy learned to fish. And Leah, she became their light. Her laughter filled the cabin. Her prayers filled their hearts. People in town stopped calling them wild. They call them something else now. The family on the mountain Dot. But peace in the wild never lasts forever. One evening, as the sun sank behind the peaks, a horse galloped up the trail. Ela stepped outside, hand on his rifle. A woman dismounted, her clothes fine, her expression sharp. "I've come for the girl," she said coldly. Leela's mother, the one who had abandoned her to the snow. Elas's jaw tightened. "You left her to die," the woman sneered. "She's mine by law." La clung to Elas's coat. "Please don't let her take me." The woman's voice dripped with venom. "You think you can keep what isn't yours, mountain man?" Elias didn't flinch. "She ain't a thing to keep. She's a child who found a home." The woman's liar stepped forward, waving papers. "Court order. We'll take her by force if we must." The boys surrounded Leah, defiant as young wolves. "You'll have to go through us first," Caleb said. voice trembling but brave, the tension cracked like thunder. The woman hesitated, staring at the ragged family standing together, not by blood, but by love. Elias met her eyes, steady as stone. "You can drag her off this mountain," he said, "but she'll never call you Mama again." Something flickered in her expression. Guilt, maybe even shame. For a long moment the only sound was the wind whispering through the pines. Then, without a word, she turned her horse and rode away. The cabin was silent after she left. Leah trembled, tears streaking her cheeks. Elas knelt and pulled her close. "You're safe, little one. No one's tacking you anywhere." Caleb put a hand on her shoulder. "You're one of us," Jake added, "always." And Tommy, barely whispering, said, "We're your brothers now." The fire crackled, and Leah's sobs turned to laughter, small, shaky, but full of relief. Weeks passed, and spring came in full bloom. The snow melted from the peaks, revealing rivers running wild again. Elias and the boys built a swing from an old oak, and Leah spent her afternoons there, hair shining in the sunlight. Sometimes Elias would sit on the porch and just watch her, the little girl who changed 5 boys and a broken man without even trying. One morning a writer brought a letter from the sheriff. It wasn't a warning, it was an adoption paper stamped and signed. "Layla Boone," it read. Ela stared at it for a long time, his hands shaking. "It's done," he whispered. When he showed it to her, Leah gasped, covering her mouth. "So I'm really your daughter now?" Elas nodded, eyes wet. "Always were, sweetheart. The law just caught up." That night they held a little feast, biscuits, stew, and laughter echoing into the valley. The boys danced around the fire while Leah played the old harmonica Elias had kept since his youth. The stars above seemed brighter, the mountain softer. "You saved us, little one," Elias murmured. "No," she said with a grin. "You saved me first." Years passed. The Boone cabin became a place of legend. Folks in town spoke of the wild man who raised 5 boys and 1 girl in the mountains. Travelers who passed through swore they heard laughter from deep in the forest, pure and joyful. Some said that if you listened closely on a winter night, you could still hear her singing by the fire. Elias grew old, but never lonely. His boys became men, strong, kind, and proud. Leah grew into a woman with a heart fierce as the mountain and soft as spring rain. She never left the cabin. "This is where love found me," she'd say. And love never leaves its home. And when the wind held through the Bitterroot peaks once more, it no longer sounded lonely. It sounded alive, carrying laughter, memories, and the spirit of one small girl who tamed 6 wild hearts. No woman ever lasted a day with the mountain man's boys, but one little girl stayed forever,